It's the Virgin Radio Takeover. Sunday mornings from 10 till 1.
On Virgin Radio.
It's Easter Monday on Virgin Radio. I'm Edith Bowman and I'm here to introduce our Richard Ashcroft special. Now, he was in studio recently for a long chat with Tim Cocker, and you can hear everything he had to say. Plus, we've got a whole lot of great songs as picked by Richard between now and 1 p.m. right here on Virgin Radio. This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I'm positive. Good.
Short sleeve weather today.
Yeah, it's one of those beautiful days in London that reminds me of Small Faces, Itchy Park or something like that. You kind of want to put one of those songs on.
And I like the fact you're wearing your own merch as well.
Yeah, it's always a no-no, isn't it? Don't wear your own merch, that kind of thing. But you know, when you wrote one of the greatest lines of all time, you know, I'm wearing it. It's Bittersweet Symphony. I wore this in Argentina, this T-shirt actually out. I got lucky enough to get a guided tour of Boca Juniors and see where the great Maradona played and look at the dressing room, and there's some wasteland out there, and we did a photograph of me with this T-shirt, and just seemed to really fit that environment. So yeah, it's rarely I do that, but I do really like this one.
There's no arguments for me that it's one of the greatest lines ever written, but it's I like the calm confidence in you saying that yourself. Yeah,
well, it's just no. Let's face it, no one's going to do it for me, you know what I mean? So I might as well big myself up.
So I remember last time you came in, Richard, it was around the release of the album, and you'd said that you'd quite enjoyed going off-grid and getting rid of your phone for a bit.
Yeah.
Is that something you've sort of done again? Have you unplugged from the world at any point?
Yeah, it's funny, it's dying. Yeah, the initial phone had to be on, unfortunately for Kate. She's getting called and emailed again. I have got another email, a sort of management-y thing, and a big phone for that. But I went back to this sort of cheap Samsung thing for a while recently, and I've noticed that because texting's so difficult on it, it really does almost stop the use of it. There's no internet on it. I can't text on it because it takes me about 15 minutes to write 3 lines. You remember the old way of you had to find the right letter? Tap 3 times to get to see it. Yeah, so in a way I'm kind of off it, but I got my fill really more with that was the sort of the Matrix, took the the red pill. I took one of the pills, went down the rabbit hole and saw enough for a lifetime. So I kind of that was one reason why I got rid of because I became kind of addicted to sort of geopolitics and the madness of what was going on and finding out what really is going on, etc., which is a never-ending journey that some people never come back out of that whole rabbit hole. You know, they're just there fried. So it was good to drag myself out of the rabbit hole and get back into the real world for a bit.
Well, that whirlwind's only got faster and madder recently. Microwave spying on us now.
Oh, I know. I mean, all this was, you know, for anyone who was interested in this stuff, this is stuff that I could have been saying to someone in a barbecue 4 years ago, and they'd be starting distancing themselves from me. You know what I mean? You start thinking, oh yeah, he's the other nutter. But at least for a lot of the people who were kind of having these conversations, who were kind of labelled a certain way, at least now people can look at them slightly differently. Say, hey, you remember that nutter at the barbecue saying that, you know, anything with the word smart on it means spy, means taking your information, etc. You know, that crazy dude, he wasn't actually that far wrong, was he? So, if anything, it's good for all them people who've been labelled as a nutter, you know, for the last few years, trying to tell people, hey, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there that we queue up for to buy that new product. And the thing that Orwell got wrong is he didn't realise that we would desire the very things that do that. You know, he thought that they were being forced by a totalitarian regime, and you would have to have a flat screen in your lounge that was taking all, you know, information from your day-to-day living. But we actually desire it. We queue it. We can't wait for the new version of the very thing. So that's the interesting thing with science fiction. So a lot of it seem to hit the nail right on the head. But in other ways, they've missed the desirability of the very things that spy on us.
This is Virgin Radio. I'm Edith Bowman. Now, we've handed control over to Mr. Richard Ashcroft and asked him to pick some of his favourite songs. This is Kano.
Let me get it one take.
This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
In terms of technology, I know it's something you embraced with the recent album you've made. And when we last spoke, you said that collaborations were going to be part of your future and exploring the sound. So any relationships blossoming there, or any thoughts you've had?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of young producers and stuff that are doing great works that, you know, maybe there might be something in the future, but it was more in a sense of being inspired by, you know, your Bowies and that, who weren't afraid to basically mix not only with the producer, but really with their musicians. Because he was a solo artist, he wasn't pinned to the same guys all the time, so he would have like a funk soul rhythm section mixed in. You know, he might have a rock guitarist, he might have 4 or 5 different elements from different genres in a way, and then trying to find a way of distilling that. So I'm still definitely open to not only where I record and who with, still trying to push that frontier for me personally, and like I say, I collaborated with No ID in New York a number of years ago, who I don't think he'd ever worked with anyone like me before, and I'd actually not worked with just a straight hip-hop R&B producer. I learned a lot from that. I learned what we bring to the table, and I learned what they can bring, and that, yeah, there is a sort of future in that as well, where that dream hybrid, like whatever, Sly and the Family Stone, Jimi Hendrix mixed with hip-hop, soul, country, blues, it's all there. So I'm still definitely up for that, but I haven't got any definite names yet that fit the bill, but
watch this space.
Watch this space, yeah, definitely.
This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
There was one live performance that I saw you do, Richard, where within it you did a name check for and a little bit of quite a supportive little message in it for Kanye West, actually.
Yeah.
What was behind that, or what do you see in him, or what motivated that?
Well, it just seemed to be, at the time, people would jump into conclusions about him, his state of mind, what he represented, what he didn't, what he should represent, you know. I don't, you know, so, yeah, that was
an outlier? Like,
no, sometimes you're ahead of your time or before your time, or maybe your concepts people, you know, don't quite get at that point, but maybe in the future they will. But I just see, an outsider, someone who is, you know, he has great self-belief and stuff, but he is very innovative in the studio, and he's come out with lots of tunes that, you know, the general public love, not just like musos or music heads like me. You know, I'm not a muso, but I'm into sort of sound and production and soul and hip-hop, and all that has always been part of my thing that I love. So I always had like that's why I ended up with No ID, because I know No ID was instrumental in the early part of Kanye's career, getting him into like in his early days in the studio. So I've always had that link, and I just thought that he was going to be used as a scapegoat now for a lot of things that were going on politically in America and stuff, and he's always that go-to person. If someone doesn't like hip-hop or doesn't like whatever, they always use Kanye as the example. I hate that stuff. I hate him. I hate that, you know. And I kind of hate that, actually, because it's deeper than that and more complex. So it's just a bit of a shout-out as everyone's jumping on the bandwagon to say the guy's crazy, he's lost it, this, that and the other. I'm just saying, no, man. You know, some of the things he's saying are right on it. Why should he be forced into any political viewpoint by anyone, by any group of people? Why should he actually support one political party and not the other? What is that, because of the colour of his skin or whatever? What is it? And I think that fighting out of your box and your bracket is really important for an artist and an individual. Is no, I will not be put in this category just because I'm a white northern guy. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean to say I'm going to be putting an X next to Corbyn's name because of Labour, or because what Margaret Thatcher did in the 80s in the north of England. Doesn't mean that for the rest of my life, because I don't believe in that paradigm anyway. Now, you know, the last sort of politician we had that was trying to spin that was Tony Blair. You know, so if anyone killed the Labour Party, that was like Tony Blair. So the death politics died, in my mind, in its old sense with Tony Blair. And I think, in a way, Kanye had that same experience a little bit with Obama. It's an eye-opener that, you know, there might be many things there that are positive, but ultimately when the guy gets in the seat, he's not really in power. And I think that's what he was trying to express is, look, you know, 1A as an individual ain't going to be forced to support or champion a Clinton or whatever because I'm like a really powerful musician who generally the Democrats feel like they own, you know, that side of America's populace, and he was again putting a fly in the ointment. He was putting a thing in the wheels, and people don't like that. People want you to perform exactly as they expect.
She take my money when I'm in need.
This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
I loved the way you talked about it when you were going into the live shows around. I think they were in South America and stuff just after the album was released, and you said, "This is a fight I'm going into. I'm going out not just to go out and hopefully do well, but to just knock these guys out that I'm coming up on stage and doing." Do you still feel that?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. It's slaying. Yeah, I said to someone after a show in Mexico, and they were talking about it, and I said, you know, the only way of putting it down is like, you got to slay the dragon on the stage at the end. You got to cut his throat. That's the battle with yourself, the battle with all the fakes, all the phonies, all the crap performers, all the sellouts that people have seen, all the shows that are being run by a Mac, all the mimers, all that. We're battling with all that to re-establish in the audience's minds, what is a great, truly transcendent performance. What does it take? So really, it's like wanting for myself to transcend as a performer and not be too much in my own mind, but also wanting to set a new bar. So those people in Buenos Aires who saw me in the theatre, believe you me that I set a new level for them, I think, emotionally, of what they expect from a concert. And that's the exciting thing, is for me, is having that kind of battle. You know, it's not all friendly and happy and this, that and the other. It's not, because you've got to come off there drained, you've got to come off there with nothing left to give and all that. And I think that has to be, you have to be in the right mental state. So if I'd just carried on touring for the last 5 years, I'm sure I wouldn't be in have that same energy or desire or hunger or whatever it is. It's very easy for this game performance to become Groundhog Day, to become a repetitive thing. You know, people have paid money and you've got to go out and go and do the thing. But that isn't creativity and that isn't true performance, you know what I mean? So I think as we edge into more and more synthetic world, a screen-based world, that people are hankering for that more and more. You know, they're hankering for that human contact, that experience where, like I say, things could fall apart, you know, the guy doesn't care that he may look a fool. All that, you know, is important to performances. Someone doing that where they say, okay, you can mock me, you can do this, that and the other, but I'm going to go to a place that it might feel you like you're on the edge of being uncomfortable. It might make you cry, you might laugh, but whatever happens in this space is going to be something that you're going to remember. And I do think that I achieved that in Chile and Mexico and places like that when I did play for the first time. There was definitely an amazing atmosphere in the room. And a feeling of coming home. I said that in Argentina. It was like, wow, this is like, I don't know what it is. I may have to do one of them genealogy things, those DNA tests. But it was like, man, I don't know whether I got some South American in me, but I feel so at home. I felt so at home in Buenos Aires.
This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
Well, you're taking your live show, you're ready for another 12 rounds, to use that boxing vernacular, and you're taking it around the UK starting on the 17th of April, Newcastle, Birmingham, Leeds, Manchester and London. So that description of the live show that South America saw and North America are about to see, that's what's coming. Yeah,
exactly. And I think up until Manchester, the Castlefield show will be probably my last show this year, and I think it's 20 years since Urban Hymns. It's going to be, you know, that last time, I suppose, that the year that we can be in a room together and I can sing those songs, and then I'll be planning and moving on to the next thing. But they're going to be very important shows, because I'm really happy we got Black Grape supporting me, playing before me on these. To have Sean Ryder there is amazing. And it's something, like I say, when I was into the Mondays as a kid and stuff, it'd be like amazing to project ahead and think, you know, one day Sean's going to be there doing his thing, and then you're going to go on an arena and do your songs. So for me, it's exciting, and I think, you know, there's been a lot of people hype themselves this, that and the other in the past, but I don't want to force anyone, but, you know, I really would, if you're half interested, just just get down there and see what you think, because I think once you've experienced it, you want to come back again and check out what I do, you know, the following year. I think it's been a bit stop-start over the years, my career and stuff, but it does feel like I'm back on track now for a while, and I'm really enjoying it. So what more can I say? You know, like I say, it's not easy, but it's something that's incredibly enjoyable and something that I want to get better at, you know. Defy that whole age thing again, you know, where people kind of put a sell-by date on people's creativity and stuff. I think, I've said before, Johnny Cash completely blew that out in the water by writing some of his best stuff and performing in his best, almost of his career at the end of his life. So it's the artist, the person that's gonna change that. And yeah, I look forward to doing that and being creative and being positive and doing some great shows. So that's going to be an amazing tour, I think. And I can't wait. I've not played Leeds for years, not played Newcastle for years. Places like that are proper live places. You know, I remember from the past being incredible. Done some great gigs with the Verve in Newcastle and myself. And obviously Glasgow's just one of the greatest, without doubt, cities in the world to play live music. It's just like very passionate. You know, that's about as close to South America as you're going to get in the Northern Hemisphere. Is probably Glasgow for that kind of outright show of emotion, not being embarrassed to let yourself go. You know, you don't have that. And obviously, like 9 pints helps that, but hey, whatever.
When we were young, they went on forever. We lived in Arizona, and this guy.
This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
You mentioned that anniversary, or that milestone of 20 years since Urban Hymns. A lot of people do some sort of, whether it's a reissue or a show, or mark that in some way. You seem like you're quite comfortable not going down that route, or is there something planned?
Yeah, I've just never been that bothered about dates and stuff. You know, the year after that's 21. Who cares, really, you know? But I know that we did do a remastered version of the album.
Yeah.
And I do know there are, you know, some great live things and stuff like that. There probably will be some package coming out. But, you know, marking it with something, you know, that isn't real, doesn't feel right, it would be wrong.
Yeah, it stands for what it is, and anyway,
it just is what it is.
Yeah.
It's still there, it's always has been, and it always will be. So whether it's 20, 25, 50, 100, you know, who cares?
Yeah.
I really don't care about these. I think Morrissey's tune on there, I think it was the Smiths, repackage, reissue, that line, I can't remember what the song was, but he kind of summed that whole culture up. You know, there's a lot of people who haven't got it yet, as in the young people. I was looking at the iTunes the other day, and Screamadelica was way up there on the main chart, because a whole new swathe of people are suddenly thinking, wow, this is a classic. Maybe like we did with Pet Sounds, or we did with, you know, whatever. As we were finding out about music, we started buying stuff from 20 years prior, you know, and 30 years, what have you, and, you know, and enjoying it. So that's what's happening now, and it's you know, it's great for the bands like that, I think, and same with Massive Attack and all those bands that did stuff that was timeless and did stuff that was groundbreaking. Is that the proof is there now with time, that time's held it out to be, a lot of that stuff was real significant works in the history of music, you know. And yeah, it was great to be young and about when that was out, you know.
This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
It's fantastic that archive and that history of music is so accessible to young people now, and I think maybe especially so because, I don't know, I'm not so sure Ed Sheeran's latest album, successful as it is and with all his songs in the charts dominating, I'm not so sure I would necessarily say that's timeless in the same way.
No, I think it's difficult now, I think, because in a way, things are being distilled in a very, I wouldn't say a cynical way, but in a pretty cold way, because people are having to, I suppose, think, right, you know, that song works with them, this song works with that lot, this song will work on this format, you know. And I don't think any of those works were made like that. You know, the great works, they weren't written or constructed or put together with that mindset. It was literally just, let's be creative and do the best we can and push the boundaries and If it's actually commercial afterwards, then fantastic. That's a real victory. But if it isn't, we know why, because we're a little bit left of centre, and the mainstream often finds it hard to support stuff that it isn't comfortable with, you know. And so instead of going out there and remaining out there, what often happened to alternative, what you would say, music or culture, is that the mainstream consumed it. And instead of having something that's dangerous that might pull out of a tour, or you get the homogenized Xerox copy of the original idea, but it has to be in a form that will tour, that will say the right thing, always, never rock the boat, but still appear to be slightly edgy.
This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
So would you say someone like Ed Sheeran, only mentioning him because he's really topical and charts now, would you say he's a marketing success, not a musical success?
No, I think he's a musical success without doubt, and he's the product of his generation, who were very savvy in the way they could communicate directly with their audience. So he was very good on that from day one. And he cut out a lot of middle people, a lot of the normal standard avenues that, you know, traditionally people would have to go through to communicate to that many people, and built them up on his own.
Well, you've done a bit of that more recently, haven't you?
Because I like that idea of direct to you. You know, I wish I could have had that through all the years of getting kind of grief from journalists and things like that. I wish I could have just spoken direct to my people then and cleared things up. But I think everyone tries to get on the back of someone like him, like any success, you know, everyone's like, why is, you know, and I think ultimately when it boils down to it, whether it's timeless or not, good luck to the dude. He's an English guy doing really well. Yeah, it's a bit odd that you can have like 10 tunes of someone's album in the top whatever, you know, and I do think we live in an environment now where the top of the pyramid earns so much more than anyone else. So, you know, I'd say the top of the musical pyramid worldwide, you know, you've got your Adeles, Coldplays, your Ed Sheerans, and then the gulf then between them, whether it be sales, streams, live concert revenue, to the next on that tier is now bigger than it was in the 80s or the 90s. So the redistribution of wealth in the industry doesn't happen anymore. You know, it's taken by, big slices of that cake are taken by very few people, and then they dominate. And in that way, it ain't good for the industry, and it isn't good for the middle ground musicians, the session musicians, the studios, etc. Because at the same time, the digitization of our environment means that millions of jobs are going to be lost. Just like, you know, when you keep getting forced down the self-checkout aisle, there's a reason for that. So they don't have to pay any staff in that building in a couple of years' time. And we all accept that there's just one guy maybe looking at some screens, or a couple of droids, you know, guarding you. But other than that, there won't be anyone there who has any rights whatsoever, who needs holiday or sick pay, or, you know, they won't be there. I often say that to people who are desperately trying to usher me into that line. You're ushering yourself, well, you might not like the job, but you are ushering your own job away, you know. So, and I think it's the same with a lot of music, is that there's a lot of money in the music industry still, but it's going to be for a very finite few people. When I was 6 years...
This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
Tying together some of what you said, you like seeing the whites of people's eyes and then having that personal experience with you live.
Yeah, live's where it comes... Live's where we go back to being human beings again, in a way, and back to what it's all about. So it's something that I could have done with my guitar 500 years ago, 400, 300 years ago. Hopefully I could have sung some of the tunes I'm writing now then, and they'd still get it. And hopefully in a few hundred years' time they'd still get it then. But a lot of the technology is also something to be embraced in making a record, and can be a real positive thing. It can also be bewildering because you can have got so many options, but... You know, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti it all. I'm just saying what's inevitable, what happens when Kodak go out of business and lose 50,000 employees, and Instagram probably employ 20 people and are worth 2 billion or whatever, you know, or get bought for billions. This is it. It's the shrinking of everything into the digitized age where, you know, a lot of people's jobs and a lot of people's, in even my industry and many industries, are going to be taken by machines and are going to be gone. So... I've said it before, when I first used a guitar tuner on a phone, you know, you see a whole industry dying out there. You see whoever manufactures the guitar tuner, that big block that needs a battery, his days are numbered. You know, and it's the same with a lot of things. So we're in interesting times ahead, but basically I think people will always hanker for the thing we had prior to this, which is that experience, like you said.
You're listening to Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker right here on Virgin Radio for a very special takeover.
Virgin Radio.
It's the Richard Ashcroft Virgin Radio takeover. And I tell you what, he's picked some absolute cracking tunes, including this one, I Wonder by Rodriguez. This is the Virgin Radio takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
The first Brit Awards I remember properly watching, sitting down and watching, was it 98?
Right.
And so you won Best Album, Best Group. Was it Oasis, The Prodigy, Radiohead?
Yeah.
And
that's strong night.
Yeah, that was a strong night. You were playing live that night.
We were playing live because we made them. Basically, we didn't want to perform. I didn't want to perform at the Brits. So this is where it goes full circle. So in your mind, you're thinking, right, we're going to change things here. We're going to show, instead of everyone being desperate to be there, we're going to make you beamers live from Brixton Academy back to your place. And I think I've said this before, we did an amazing thing with the homeless charity. We managed to get $100,000 from the Nike ad. We passed that on. George Best awarded us our award. And in that one night, you know, it encapsulated so much of my vision of the future of what this could be. But where we sit 20 years later, 19 years later, a bunch of people desperate to be there. You know, an audience full of wannabe reality TV nobodies, nothing to do with music, and it's just gone in the total opposite direction to what the Verve achieved that night, or we're trying to represent, and who we represented, or I thought I was representing, was the future, as in, no, let's get the musicians back in power, let's stop being slaves to these people. Let's stop being governed by these marketing men and all that. They don't know the score. They never have done. It takes people like us to reshape music, not them. And I think, you know, that was fun for us then, because we still felt like it was a battle. We still felt like that old part of the industry was a dinosaur that needed slaying. But that old part of the industry is a dinosaur that now gets fed, stroked, taken for walks. People have embraced it. They've forgotten, because so people will do anything for short-term fame now, as we know. That's changed fundamentally. So if you're saying no to stuff in this industry or any industry, and yet you've got a mile-long queue of people who'll do anything for that moment, you're on a bit of a loser if you're trying to establish a sort of sense of self-worth or authenticity or anything else. You're suddenly scrapping for the same bits that other people do anything for. So that's how the game's changed since 1980s. I think there's, instead of being a fight against that old way of doing things, that culture has been embraced. And like I say, what was all the alternative has been consumed. And we're now spat out this sort of designer alternative reality, which is so safe. How can it be alternative to the thing that we're supposed to be the alternative to?
This is the Virgin Radio takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
And 2 years prior, your good mates Liam and Noel were the ones up there picking all the gongs. And what was refreshing about that is they didn't practice. They didn't think about what they were going to say. They didn't practice what they were going to say.
Again, that was refreshing, wasn't it? Because up until then, everyone had, like, I remember when Liam first came on the scene and I met him and he played with the Verve, and one of the earliest quotes of mine about them was something about Liam not being afraid of Radio 1. And, like, people were like, what do you mean afraid? What I mean is, he doesn't, if he was ever to be interviewed, he'll just say it as it is. You know what I'm saying? Because at the time, there was such a sort of dominance over things by different corporations that it seemed like artists before just lived in fear, and they edited themselves, or they created this bogus identity in order to sell their product on a mainstream thing. And then you feel that force, and that's what people enjoyed in the country, because we were all sick of it as well. we were sick of this, slaves to that idea of what we can be and can't be. So yeah, I think we'll come back. It comes in circles, because I think people are always hungering for it, you know what I mean? They're always hankering after that. It's just that, is that allowed to nourish and grow anymore? You know, when you, like I say, you can have the alternative to that, to Liam or whatever, but this guy goes on tour. This guy doesn't go, like, you know, turn 360 degrees at Heathrow Airport and get back in a cab and not go to America. The new version of him goes to America. He does all the interviews. He does the tour. Why have the real thing when you can have the doppelganger?
The real thing is another person who we're delighted to have back and involved, and I know you're going to be doing some. You're going to be working with him or sharing a stage. Yeah. And have you heard any of his new album?
No, I haven't. No, but yeah, I'm just really glad he's doing it. I know he said he didn't want to do a kind of solo-y thing, but you know, that's just the way it's turned out, and really excited for him. He should be doing it. You know, he's a bit like you said about me. You know, there's no, get on, make your next record. I think he said that to me after United Nations. You know, get in there, make your next one. People might not understand it and get it now, but you know, don't let it halt you. Don't stall. Get on with it. Just get another record out. And I think, you know, that's exciting. And you can't underestimate how many people. You know, Liam put himself on the line for that band. His personality and everything. He had to rise up to something that was phenomenal. You imagine having to put your jacket on and go out and get a pint of milk at that point. You know, you got to put Jumping Jack Flash on first before you go out the door. He said that himself to me, and I understood that. Yeah, because you've got the weight of all that on you. You people wanting you to live that dream for them and be that guy. So, you know, that's a lot to take, man. Like, if you're not feeling a certain way on a certain day, or you're just a guy, you know, you're just a kid, really, from Manchester who sings songs, and the band happened to be one of the most phenomenally successful groups in the history of British music.
Maybe. This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
You're going to be doing a show with him?
Yeah, in Norway, I believe.
In Norway, yeah. So you've always been very, very clear. You know, when people said, "Oh, would you work with Liam? Would you work with Noel?" You're like, "Well, I can't pick. I'm not going to pick. I'm not going to be the middle brother being pulled one way or the other." So does that mean now you're sort of duty bound to do something with Noel as well?
No, I mean, not gig-wise, I don't know. I think Noel don't care about that, really, about whether I played the gig with Liam or anything like that. It was more, I felt more about Liam is like, me and Noel could do something in a flash, you know what I mean? No sweat. You know, he's the king of, like, melodies. He's got tons of chords. I'm pretty good with melodies. I'm pretty good with words, so it's a piece of cake for us. But I didn't want to be doing something like that, thinking that Liam and thoroughly got his thing together at the time. So people were asking me at a time where I wasn't even aware Liam was actually recording. All I knew is that he'd said he never wanted to make a solo album, and so I was presuming he wasn't working. So the fact he's working and doing stuff, that changes the dynamic a little bit more for me. So I'm open to work with either of them, really, you know, and it'd be really exciting, you know, really exciting.
Are they one of your? I'm just imagining what your primitive phone is like. Have you got like if their numbers
when
still
I find
saved on your
old
phone?
ones, I'll see their old numbers in there. But you know, with our relationship, because we were busy when we were friends, you know, very busy. It was one of them. You know, I can go X amount of years and not see Liam, but it actually doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. There's so much shared experiences, as in what we've been through. As where, you know, our backgrounds, where we're from, our positions in the band.
And do you know what, you describing that? Do you know what I think? Like, again, with you said I have all these imaginary friends that I never see that are on social media thing, and actually the ones where you cannot see them, and then it feels like you're picking up where you left off. They're actually the ones that I really
you have a bond
closest.
with. Yeah, definitely. Same here. I mean, the ones who constantly need, you know, online affirmation that you're still a friend. You know, that I don't have any of those anyway. I don't have anything like that in my life. I barely have any friends, but that's because being in this game, the sieving process happens very, very quickly. You know, suddenly, you know, you're losing all manner of people. People are acting really strange. You end up with a pretty close set, and that's good, man. You know, you always got to be suspicious of brand new friends, you know, all appearing everywhere. It's like boxing, you know, you're suddenly doing well and your corner's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you know. When you're bleeding in the shower and you've lost the title, there's no one there. It's the cliche, but it's so true, you know. So I've been through that, so I don't have that problem with tons and tons of friends. But, you know, if I'm looking at people who supported me, you know, when the Verve weren't a big band at all, Noel Gallagher went out of his way to support us. He was vocal about it. And then, you know, this was around Northern Soul, and then Urban Hymns came out, and he was proved correct. Liam has always supported me. I've done gigs where I've been forgetting lyrics. He's walked on stage in front of the whole crowd and said, you know, he's, you know, just bizarre moments where, you know, there's definitely a bond there that will be there forever, you know. And you know, I'm just really, for me, the Liam thing's just happy that he can get on, crack on now and do his own thing, and then maybe one day when, you know, the brothers feel right, it'll be a fantastic gig when they do play again together one day, you know, in the future.
I'm Edith Bowman. There's more Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker after this.
Virgin Radio.
This is the Virgin Radio Takeover with Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker.
The problem is like I felt with the Verve for a long time. It's, yeah, as Noel probably underappreciates now, just every single interview, every single one. It doesn't matter what you've done, how good your new song is, what a life, aka, yeah but when Oasis come, you know what I mean? I think that becomes the drag. You know, but, and also you've set your stall under a name, like I've said many times before, you know, the Verve, Coca-Cola. Now I'm Panda Cola. We used to have a thing called Panda Shandy when I was a kid.
I remember it.
Yeah.
You used to get it at the chip shop.
Yeah. I'm now Panda Cola, but I'm the main ingredient of the original cola. But that doesn't matter, because people have been programmed with the advertising and the corporate stuff that they now only associate that with that. And it's the same with Oasis, you know what I mean? People want that. They want this idea of that. That's, you know, and that equals this, and blah, blah, blah. Even though over the years, you know, there's only at the end, probably Noel and Liam, the original members in the band there on the stage, you know. But people want those two together with that name, and then bang. Yeah. As, you know, I played a gig with Noel in Glasgow, and he had Right Here, Right Now on the PA before he went on. And I was thinking, man, that is brave. Because he had like 40,000 people singing at the top of their voices an Oasis tune before he goes on and does a solo show. But you could hear in the crowd how much they want Oasis like as well, you know, how much they would love to see the two brothers. Because, you know, there's a lot of people could be snobby at times about them and stuff like that. As far as I'm concerned, if you didn't see them early shows and that dynamic between Liam and Noel, and with Mark Coyle, their own sound man, pushing them like Boneheads mad block guitars up to feel like Velvet Underground with everything feeding, it was such a melange of rock and roll that it was just unique. You know, it was almost, you could really feel the Pistols in Liam, Lydon, you could really feel the sort of Beatles, but you could feel, like I said, the bit of the Stooges, you could feel it all. Like, this was our hip-hop, as in we were interpreting all the things we loved and coming out with stuff, but we were playing it. We weren't just sampling stuff. We were actually, you know, Noel was like carving out the best things that he loved into brand new pieces of music, but with all these echoes and stuff of riffs that you might have think you've heard before, but when you put it all together, you know, the Oasis never sound like the Beatles to me. Definitely maybe doesn't sound like the Beatles. There's a few R's and stuff like that, and a few nice harmonies and a few nice little whatevers, but it ain't Beatles. It's Oasis. It's when it was. And so it's good. I always like I said years ago, the only time I ever used to see a magazine or pick it up and buy it was when one of them was on, because it was funny. And that's what it was like at the time. It was great to have a laugh and it be funny again, and people not being embarrassed about wanting to be a rock and roll, you know, take it to a whole new level, sell a load of records. Not be content on making some tune just because it's slightly avant-garde and no one really likes it, but you think you're cool. The coolest thing is to write something the world can accept, but it's got a depth. And I think that's what they achieved, you know. Of course, they had the troubles along the way. All bands do, but they seem to get an extra dollop of anti-whatever, northern, whatever the thing is snobbery from a certain section of our culture. And that's something I've faced, and I think it's something we'll always have until, you know, the people who end up writing about music come from different places, don't all come from the same schools with the same sort of ideology. They all seem to come from the same factory, You know what I mean? We have a few sort of known, like, music journalists, etc., this, that and the other, but essentially for most of my career, they all seem like they all came from the same womb.
I'm Edith Bowman. You've been listening to Richard Ashcroft in conversation with Tim Cocker right here on the Virgin Radio Takeover.
This life is